Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to the 10th installment of the Digital Campfire Download. That's the series where I talk to the creatives and entrepreneurs who are building and stoking the world's most interesting digital campfires right now, as well as the experts who know the space inside and out. So I'm Sarah Wilson. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a digital strategist. I'm based in LA. I created the term digital campfire to refer to a type of online destination that's more intimate, more private, more interactive than public-facing social platforms. I launched the series to meet the creative and entrepreneurial forces behind hyper-engaged digital campfires with a goal to get inside them and to really understand the strategies that make them tick, especially in a time when there's so much damn uncertainty. So I could not be more excited to introduce my guest today, but first, just a quick FYI. So as you may have noticed, I have muted all of you. So if you can't talk, that's why. The conversation is going to run about 35-40 minutes, and you're going to have the chance to ask questions at the end. Feel free to also ask questions throughout the interview via the chat feature. You'll see that in Zoom, and when I open it up for questions at the end, I'll do my best to get to them. That's like my favorite part, as I was saying. Or at the end, feel free to raise your hand via the raise hand feature, and I will call on you and also unmute you so you can ask the question yourself. Also note, this is going to be, it is recorded, and I will be sharing it out afterwards. And I'm doing this from home, like all of us. So, you know, there might be a chance we get disconnected. I hope not. It's never happened. But if that happens, just dial back in. So now on to my guest today. Greg Isenberg is an entrepreneur who has built and advised an impressive number of community-first businesses. The last two companies he founded, Islands, a chat app for college kids, and 5by, a video discovery app, were acquired by WeWork and StumbleUpon, respectively. These days, he runs Late Checkout, a product studio that designs, creates, and acquires internet communities. It was behind the recent viral phenomenon, you probably need a haircut.com. And he also advises powerhouses like TikTok on community growth strategies. I first heard Greg a few weeks ago in an interview on another podcast and was blown away by what he had to say. I was driving at the time, and his hot takes on online communities, specifically around the role communities have in driving virality and as a fruitful source of community-first business ideas, were so damn insightful that I actually had to pull my car over to the side of the road to take notes. Like, actually, that's what I like to do. So obviously, I'm thrilled he agreed to join me here today. Please welcome Greg. So nice.
The crowd goes wild.
The crowd goes wild. I wish we had like a crowd, like I need an audio to drop right there. But trust me, I've gotten so many DMs and people contacting me going like, oh my God, Greg's the real deal. Like, I'm so excited to join today. So please know that is the case. So Greg, building community first businesses is really in your bones. And I would love for you to walk us through kind of what your trajectory has been to get where you are today, kind of, you know, high level, take us from sort of the beginning to what you're doing now at Late Checkout, just so people have a sense of sort of what has been your history in the space.
Totally. I don't know what it is, why I love community, but there's just something about bringing people together and just seeing like the magic that happens when you put people together that really gets me off, I guess. You know, I've always been that person who like loves throwing dinner parties, you know, and just like bringing a bunch of random people at a table. So that's the type of person I am as an individual. And you know, growing up, I saw technology as this way to do that digitally. It's cool if you bring your friends together. It's very cool if you bring, you know, strangers and some friends together. It's the coolest if you bring people from all over the world together. So just been fascinated by that and have just looked at different verticals over the last, you know, since a teenager, really, you know, building communities and, you know, anything from the largest cannabis community on the internet to one of the largest finance communities on the internet to just, you name it, just trying to like, whatever it is I'm passionate about at the time, trying to think about like how I can bring those people together. So yeah.
No, with those two examples, you worked on those, or those were interests of yours? Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us, how did that, so that was like early college, like what was that?
Yeah, I mean, it's even before college. So,
Hmm.
starting at 16, 17, 18, building, I helped build the largest video cooking community on the internet at one point called startcooking.com.
Hmm.
I was really interested about cooking. And that blew up. I remember, I think even Steve Jobs showed, and this is, I'm dating myself, but an iPod video uh, with the Start Cooking, channel
No
on it, and I was
way.
like, yeah,
Okay.
it like blew my mind. And that's kind of like why, again, like little moments like this, where I'd create a product, bring a
Hmm.
group of like-minded people together,
Hmm.
and then see like it spread like crazy to the point where you have a Steve Jobs or Apple showing the
Right.
product. It's like from, Montreal, Canada, which is like relatively random into, it's not New
Yeah.
York, it's not Tokyo. Um, so yeah, as sort of a late teenager, early 20s, I just got together with some friends and we started an agency and we built products and communities for companies, but we also built our own startups and we built
Hmm.
10 community type startups. One of which was the cooking one
Hmm.
of which was this finance education company. Um, and some of those ended up getting acquired.
Hmm.
After that, I started, as you mentioned, Five by, which basically was focused on different communities and serving them up interesting videos to watch.
Hmm.
So you basically open up this app, and it was kind of similar to how TikTok works today, where you'd have like For You pages, but
Hmm.
it would be like if you're interested in cooking, it would show you a For You for cooking, and then you'd be able to connect with those people. And that got
Hmm.
acquired by StumbleUpon, and StumbleUpon was, I don't know if you remember, but it was a popular social network around finding your interests.
Yeah. It was interest
Um,
based. It was like using content to connect you to other
yeah,
people with the same interests. Yeah.
and it's also just a lesson in communities, which is like, how do you serve up content first
Hmm.
to get people sort of interested in something, and then you can build sort of a more formal network community type
Hmm.
around it. So it was super popular at the time. I was on the management team there. That got acquired, and then started Islands, which was this whole
Yeah.
concept that group chat is the new social network.
Right.
And if you believe that, then you believe that it's going to verticalize, just how social networking verticalized.
Hmm.
So,
Can you give us
you
what
know,
year was that when you actually had that insight and then went to go build that? Just because I love to give people like a where
20
this was.
at the end of 2015,
Yeah.
we started that company. We kind of had like a 5 slide deck. It was like, group chat is new social network. It's going to verticalize. There's going to be a place
Hmm.
to talk with your work. There's going to be a place to talk with finance people, with gamers. That
Hmm.
all ended up happening. Like Slack is
Hmm.
huge. It's a huge
Yeah.
workplace thing. Finance is, happening, I would say. Discord is in the gaming space.
Yeah.
Worth $4 billion. And we ended up starting with college students.
Yeah.
Um, and I knew nothing about college.
So that
Like,
actually I feel like would surprise people because seemed like you were young enough to have just been in that demographic, but actually you didn't really have a lot
I
of
wasn't.
experience. Yeah. So
I
tell us about
wasn't.
how that developed and sort of what your customer like investigation strategy was for that.
Sure. So how it happened was, I'm a big believer now in start with the community and then build the software
Yeah.
versus like start with the software and then build the community.
Hmm.
And I ended up, we made a mistake in the sense that we built the software and we're like, okay, now where do we go?
Hmm. For
Um,
islands. This is for
for
islands. Just
islands.
yeah.
Exactly. So, but one of our interns started basically giving it, he was in college, actually, University of Western Ontario.
Mm.
And he basically started giving it to his friends and they were really excited about it.
Hmm.
And when we did, because there was no way that you can open up an app at, University of Alabama and just see all these different group chats
Hmm.
and communities and people around you at all. Like that existed, when I went to college briefly, when, I had Facebook and I could see like who's in my class and a directory of all these people.
Hmm.
But that doesn't exist. It didn't exist back, it doesn't exist now.
Right.
So, um, I fundamentally believe that the only way to really build a thriving community is if you embed yourself and really understand yourself in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did was, so this is 2017, 2018
Mm-hmm.
now. And because I went to school in Canada, and only for a short amount of time I dropped out because, we were building startups, it was selling. I was like, screw, not
Yeah.
worth it.
I'm over this. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm over this. The only thing I barely knew anything about, I guess the only thing I really knew about US colleges was what I saw on like Van Wilder and
Right.
like
Right.
Old School.
Right. Which is all accurate. I think everyone can attest.
Well,
So
honestly, it's probably 95% accurate is the crazy thing.
so you had to go find out for yourself, essentially. Like, okay, I built
So I
this
went to go,
product.
yep.
Now
So
yeah.
I went to go find out for myself. So, and I was living in San Francisco in Silicon Valley, I guess, at the time. And, I was seeing all these like social app entrepreneurs build these products, but they never would like leave their apartment in the Mission and district in San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco. And like the key, but their users were in like Des Moines, Iowa, or their
Right.
users were in, the Midwest. And it's like, you have to really understand them. So I ended up saying to myself, I'm going to go spend basically a year and I'm going to go from school to school and basically live almost as it, kind of embed myself as a college student.
And you were like in your mid-20s at the time.
I was a 28 at the time.
Oh my God, like late 20s.
Late 20s,
Okay.
almost early 30s.
Okay. So you went and lived on campus?
So we basically we hired someone in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who was
Mm-hmm.
our head of growth, and we started like basically a small office in Tuscaloosa, and it was like my first time in the South, which was
Mm-hmm.
a crazy experience. And our base was in Tuscaloosa, but we basically lived off campus, and we would go to campus, and we try to you know get feedback on the product we were building, and trying to understand what communities mattered, and
Mm-hmm.
um, that's what we did.
So what shifted, when you came down from the Mission, you moved to Tuscaloosa, what actually shifted for you in terms of, oh, we thought our product was for this group of people, it's actually for this group of people? What did that research glean for you?
So when we first went down, the reason we went to Tuscaloosa in the South was the going framework for how do you launch a startup, a social startup, was go to Greek life. So like if you think of like Tinder, Bumble, House Party at the time, they basically went to all these fraternities and sororities and would get them to use it. So we looked at the map of the US and we are like, where's the highest percentage of Greek life? It's in the South.
Mm-hmm.
And the mecca of that is in Alabama. So we went down there and we pitched every fraternity and sorority, and keep in mind I knew like nothing. I was like Sigma Chi, what does that mean? Like Rush, what does that mean? Bid Day, I don't understand these concepts, but these are
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to build a community, you have to like understand the the life cycle of your community member
Mm-hmm.
in order to really serve them. So I was sort of studying it like an academic.
Mm-hmm.
And we realized that fraternities and sororities actually did not resonate with the product. And um, and then we started asking ourselves why, and we realized that if you think about it, a fraternity and sorority is basically like a built-in social network.
Yeah.
Like the reason you sign up to a fraternity or sorority is like to make friends, to like have meaning, to feel like you're a part of something bigger than yourself, to get access to events.
Mm-hmm.
These are all like typical you know community structure type thing. And we were building an app basically you know for like the LGBT community to come together, or the Black community to come together, or Muslims on campus. And
Mm-hmm.
you know
People who didn't already have a built-in social network, who needed this
exactly.
actual service. Like, so I was thinking about like who actually needs us.
Yeah.
What are the communities who need us? Got it.
And it was hidden in plain sight, because our mission statement was to connect the disconnected.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we didn't realize, we got influenced by sort of this sort of Silicon Valley marketing technique, when we really should have just took a step back to really understand, like, what does the community of people want,
What do they
and
want?
what do they want, and how do we like give it to the people that want it the most. And as soon as we started creating, group chats around like LGBT people in Tuscaloosa,
Yeah.
LGBT, which like to this day, like if you're gay in, Tuscaloosa, like some people, like, you live in California,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
in
really hard to
Montreal,
find your people. Like,
hard to find your people. Like, so we'd go to those groups, and they were just with open arms, basically being like, thank you so much for giving us a home. So we looked at it as like, how do we, how do we give homes to all these people? And as soon as we started doing that, the numbers just took off.
Wow, that's such a that like what a lesson for sort of listening and actually embedding yourself to do that. You have this real talent both for sniffing out communities, like you just described as one example, and also cultivating these vertical networks around them. Again, kind of like pouring lighter fluid on them, like helping them ignite. So I think there's a really interesting art to both, but also a science. You've sort of honed in on some of the science, but can you talk a little more about that, sort of what it takes to sniff out communities to potentially build businesses around? I mean, you described one tactic, going in and listening and sort of really getting what people are asking for. Are there others?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, I try to do is try not to think of a community as a business, because as soon as I start doing that, I end up being drunk, essentially, and I
You
make
need
poor
to come up with
decisions.
you end up being like communities drunk, or like you basically like it affects your thinking. You're like,
It affects my
yeah,
thinking.
yeah, yeah.
I need, like, if you want to create, if you want to build and serve a great community, you need to be sober, and you have to be like at one with your community. So the first step is be at one with your community, whatever that means in this particular case. So, with me as an example, like it meant, like, do you think I wanted to be in, Auburn or Oxford, Mississippi, when I didn't know anyone and the food was not very good and you couldn't get healthy options, like things are, or just like sweating my face. Like, no, I didn't want that. Like, but I was like, this is what it takes in order to be the best at this particular community. And I wanted to be the best at this community. And given, especially right now, that there's been this, so much interest in building and cultivating vertical networks and communities, there's basically going to be, and there is starting to be, a gold rush.
Yeah.
And 95%+ of people are going to fail. And the people that are going to succeed are going to be the people that are at one with the community. So the first thing I do is be at one with your community, and then try to just like take notes. Like, simple as that. Like, what are people saying? What are people saying? So like going to them and saying like, okay, like, what do you like about what I'm doing? What do you don't like about what I'm doing? And then and then take yourselves out of it and just be like, how's life? Like, what are the, how happy are you? What are things that you can be better? Oh, try to understand their emotions. Because like ultimately when you're building a community, you're building something that satisfies a set of emotions. So either they're lonely or they're sad or they're feeling anxious. So for example, like, there's a lot of anxiety that exists right now in college students going back to school.
Yeah.
So the question is there a community that you can build around that? So take notes is like the step number 2. And then step 3 is distill the notes, I guess. Is like, okay, so this is what they said, but what are they really saying?
Right. Read between the lines, because they might not
Read
have
between
told
the
you in
lines.
plain English what they want.
Yeah.
It might be,
And most of the time they don't, actually. Most of the time they're saying something, but you have to, it's the classic Henry Ford quote. If I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse.
Right.
And then
They're not
he
going to
built a
tell
car.
you. Yeah, they're not going to
Yes,
tell you directly. So it does
they're not
require
going to
some
tell you.
understanding of like what's going on in the culture and how do you read that and then apply that to what the community wants.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then
Mm-hmm.
what the beauty is now there's this, movement around low code and no code,
Mm-hmm.
meaning there's a lot of tools that are out there for free or almost, very small amount of money to actually go and create landing pages and
Mm-hmm.
bulletin boards and group chats. And, so the question is, how can you take some of the software that exists already,
Yeah.
create a brand that really resonates, and put it in front of people to get feedback?
Mm-hmm. Right. Because you don't actually have to go build the thing. You can actually
No,
just do
no.
something super lo-fi. So a
Yes.
great example of sniffing out a community that, existed but maybe wasn't really being spoken to is your latest project, You Probably Need a Haircut. And the
Yeah.
connection to Reddit is really interesting. Can you talk us through that?
Sure. So we have a thesis at Late Checkout, which is
Which is your
that
current agency that you co-founded? Just to,
yes,
yeah.
yes, exactly. So at Late Checkout, we kind of have three arms. The first is we have an agency. We help a bunch of brands in terms of innovation lab community work. So partnering to sort of think about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We have a fund where we acquire internet communities, and then we have a product studio where we actually incubate our own communities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of the things we do on Thursdays actually is um, we well, before I say that, actually I should say that one of our fundamental theses is that Reddit is being unbundled currently. And what
Yes,
that
we're
means,
gonna talk a lot about that. Tell me what that means. What you see that as.
so our belief on the world is that on social media, I should say, is that social media is great because it gave everyone a microphone, and that's awesome. People before social media, Facebook and Twitter Instagram didn't have these microphones.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out that if you give everyone a microphone, the party gets pretty loud.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's trying to speak over each other, and it's also hard. You're kind of in your own friend circle. It's hard to like expand beyond them, and that's why you're seeing this shift towards groups and communities that you're seeing today. So, you can call it a shift, or what I would call it more is people are seeking refuge.
Mm-hmm.
The most fun part about the internet is like these Discord groups, these Slack communities, these group chats, Fortnite worlds, anything group based that seems like I can find my people.
Yeah.
Reddit is one of those places which has surged in traffic recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes a lot of sense because, if you think about Reddit, it's basically these sub communities that exist. And one of the things we realized is Reddit is almost like how I transported myself and went to, Alabama. Reddit
Mm-hmm.
is kind of like a really great way to transport
Right.
yourself without actually going to Alabama.
Right.
No
Right.
hate on Alabama, just like it's a lot of,
Yeah.
it, it's a lot of
Yeah.
work
It's
to
like a
go
whole
and
situation. You have to,
the whole
if you can
situation.
do it from your computer, great. Yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at Reddit, and it turns out that there's actually this, um, Reddit has done a good job at obviously creating a cookie cutter basically solution for communities to come together.
Mm-hmm.
But my belief is that there's a demand for more bespoke experiences than
Mm-hmm.
cookie cutter experiences.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's like the
So
phase one. Like if you're in a Reddit group,
yeah,
like it's the basics that you're getting covered, but there's no specific tools for them. There's no specific
right.
moments that you're experiencing. So how to do that is really the question.
Exactly. So, you know, we think that, going back to the unbundling of Reddit, that you can actually look at some, a subreddit and actually go back to like, that framework that I basically described. You can actually do that framework, but within the context of the subreddit. You can actually be at one with a community
Mm-hmm.
pretty well and pretty quickly. Like spend 1 hour a day for
Mm-hmm.
7 days in a subreddit, or 2 hours a day, and you're gonna like, you'll understand like their language. You'll, you know,
Yeah.
you'll understand the jokes that they make. You'll understand what needs they have,
How they speak. Yeah.
how they speak.
Referring to it as language is really the way. It
Yeah,
nails it.
exactly. So, and the other bonus is that there's tools, like there's a tool called redditlist.com, that basically shows you upcoming subreddits or trending subreddits and stuff like that, that allows you to see like a bird's eye view of what the hell's happening in different subreddits. So every Thursday, what we do at late checkout, is our product team actually goes and like, we go around and we pick a vertical that one of us is passionate about or interested in, and we talk about how we would quote unquote unbundle it, meaning how can we create a tool to supercharge this community? How can we create a network to supercharge this community? And if you look at building a community in that lens, I think it's quite interesting, because it really allows you to kind of cut the noise in a lot of ways. And also, you know, the one thing I will say is that, because I've given this strategy to a lot of people, I've noticed that like 95% of the people I give this strategy to, like, they basically create another community, but they don't actually, like, they'll basically go and find another cookie cutter solution, and basically like try to
Port
let's
the
say that
community over there.
port it.
Like, yeah.
But that's not what we're talking
That's
about, like
not
super, yeah, like
designing for them, listening to what they
designing
want,
for
what's
them.
not being fulfilled on that platform, and then actually creating a new solution for them.
And a lot of the time designing with them, like
Right.
trying to like get to know people in the community and be like, hey, like, this is what I'm thinking.
Right.
Insert no code and low code thing
Right.
here. Let me show you something. What do you think? Oh, hey, like, what if it did this? What if it did that?
Right. Right. So you've just identified like 50 tactics. This is amazing. It's design with them is probably one of the most important. How does this all figure into you probably need a haircut? Because
right. So
that, for those of you who don't know, like, it went crazy viral. You're on the Today Show.
Yeah.
Like, talk to us a little bit about and the connection to Reddit.
Totally. So you know, this was around the, you know, early quarantine time, like April, I would say. And so people are quarantining, people is their hair is getting longer. You know, we were combing through the stylist / barber community, and what we noticed is that
On Reddit.
a lot of
on Reddit. Yeah.
We noticed was basically that a lot of people couldn't afford their rent, basically, because they were out of jobs. You know, 50% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And we saw that on one side, and then on the front page of Reddit, we were seeing pictures of people cutting their own hair and how bad they were.
Right.
And we kind of put, you know, and then I was talking to my girlfriend about it, and I was like, yeah, I need a haircut. And she's like, oh, I'll cut your hair. And I was like, you're a data scientist. Like, you know, you're great. I mean, I appreciate that so much. However, you know,
probably not going to be a great
probably
haircut.
not. Yeah. So, and then I called my own barber, and he was like, yeah, things are really tough right now, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was like, okay, let's go build something. And we built something in a matter of a few days using no code stuff. And we just published it, and it went completely viral. Millions of people saw it, used, you know, thousands used it. It was and it is still a sort of big success. And I don't think we wouldn't have come across these insights if we weren't combing Reddit. No pun intended.
I think a lot of people, It's a good one, and I'd like you to integrate some more puns into this today.
Thank you.
What I think is interesting is this notion of virality, because I think anyone who works in this world knows that you're constantly asked to create things, experiences, events, whatever, to go viral. And to a certain extent, that's like totally ridiculous. Like, you can't predict it, but in a certain way, you actually can. There's a certain set of things that have to be in place in order to do it, and the rest is, of course, like, up to the gods. But can you talk a little bit about the connection between virality and having a built-in community?
I think that if you're at one with your community, then and you understand how internet products go viral,
Mm-hmm.
then there's a high likelihood, like, that your product will go viral. So I can actually see my girlfriend's in here, I think.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And I went to her on that Friday night, and I was like, I know that this is good, like, with a high likelihood of probability that this will go viral.
You probably need a haircut. That one. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What was it
So,
that you sort of were discerning or reading the tea leaves on in that?
well, it was a marketplace, meaning
Mm-hmm.
a place where there's buyers and sellers.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that the buyers had a huge problem because they were all over the front page of Reddit, and there are
Mm-hmm.
millions of these people.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew the sellers, i.e., the stylists, would really needed work
Yeah.
and would do their best job to, like, create a great impression and do all, do great work, basically,
Mm-hmm.
virtually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I also knew that, like, it's also important to think about how can you reverse engineer press stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
What?
the media is, like, always looking for interesting stories,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't know what to do with quarantine and stuff like that. So, we just sent out like 15, 20 messages to some journalists, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
practically all of them were interested in covering it.
So you cold emailed journal, you
Yes.
cold DM them,
Cold.
and it was just the strength of the idea,
I
basically, that
Yeah,
captured them. Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. But also, I think it's going in with this idea of what is the headline? What's the headline before you even create the products? What's the headline you
Right.
want to generate? And in this case, the name of it was totally hilarious and brilliant because it conveyed really a point of view. You probably need
Yeah,
a haircut.com.
totally. And I think it also, like, it's it's important to think about when you create a product, how do you create it so that there's a high likelihood of word of mouth? And
Yeah.
that's why I think a name is super, super important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that people often, don't spend enough time thinking about how can you create a name such that, like, that particular community is
Mm-hmm.
going to spread it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So having that built-in word of mouth network, basically.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
So there's a ton of communities out there. I mean, there's a million jillion, right? Like, and there's probably a million jillion on Reddit alone. And so
Yep.
how do you really identify the ones that have the potential to actually become businesses? Because that's quite different. How do you know where to focus? And I know you're saying you try not to get drunk on that, but
Yeah.
there's got to be like a sense of, okay, these are the types of people who would maybe spend money. Like, how do you even know
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I mean, what I always say is, like, I always start with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, what do I have the competitive advantage? Like, if I understand, if I day trade, which I don't, but let's say I did, um, I might understand that community more, therefore I might have more likelihood for success at being at one with that community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the reason why we started doing these, like, Thursday sessions for unbundling of Reddit with our
Mm-hmm.
product team is, I can't scale. There's only so many things that I
Mm-hmm.
could potentially be passionate about or understand that well. But other people on our team, like, there's it's like that. There's that saying, I guess, you're the sum of the five people you spend time with or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
most time with. Really, like, we should update that saying. It's just more like you're the sum of the five communities you spend the most time with.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think, like, when you're trying to systematically create and unbundle something like Reddit, you have to ask yourself, well, how do I bring it? And that's why it comes into a diverse team. Um, how do you create a diverse team so that these people all have 5 completely different communities
that they're bringing to the table.
that they're bringing to the table? And then, so basically you have all those things, and it's like you have a list of those things. And then you compare that to what's happening on places like Reddit and where's the world moving towards. And then I think it'll be obvious to you as to like which communities could you monetize more or not. Like who has more disposable income. You know, is this, you know, a community that, for example, moms generally spread stuff more versus, you know, people 65 and older, you know? So, you know, is this something that could be more viral? So and then I think that's where the business comes in, but I would still argue that like the first thing to do is just think about what they need. And if you create something that they need, they're going to be likely willing to pay for it. As long as they have disposable income. As long as they have disposable income.
So it's hitting that sweet spot. So you obviously talk a lot about Reddit. There's many other platforms. Do you see this as specific to an unbundling of Reddit only, or is this happening on other big platforms, Facebook, for example? And I see that Ryan asked a similar question to this, so love to understand that more.
Yeah, so Facebook groups hit 1 billion monthly active users. Wow. So it's pretty big. I think there's a ton to learn from Facebook. It's just a bit harder to get some of these nuggets and discover a bit more, but it's totally there. I actually believe that most large consumer internet companies are actually being unbundled currently. Zoom is being unbundled.
Wait, what? How is Zoom being unbundled?
So, I mean, this is actually a pretty good example right here, actually, is that Zoom was designed for like small group video chat within the context of a company. Like we're using it right now for like a live podcast, with people asking questions. Like the use case is completely different. I mean, yes, it's working, but like
it's not ideal. It's not ideal.
And I'm sure you would have a lot of, you know, a laundry list of feature ideas that you probably wish you can do that you can't.
Totally.
So, but there's this, you know, particular use case, but what are the 500 other use cases that exist that are, you know, in a bunch of different other verticals? Like, for example, like I noticed that people, you know, people started using Zoom for like group yoga classes or one-on-one yoga classes. And it's like, is this, you know, I think of Eric, the founder of Zoom and CEO of Zoom, and like, he's probably like, wow, I can't believe people are using Zoom for this use case.
Yeah, it was an enterprise solution, and like now it's being used for completely different things. You're so right. I didn't even think of it that way. It's sort of like, yeah, duh, this is totally going to happen, and it already is.
It already is. And if we rewind to like how I was thinking 2015 about group chat as the new social network, and it's basically a lot, you know, Slack at the time was being unbundled. People were using Slack for the use case of communities when Slack is designed as a workplace tool. Like the same history is repeating itself. Except now the platforms are just a lot bigger, and there's just a lot more opportunity because of COVID is accelerating a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to dig in on, because I think we're in this crazy moment where all of this is being accelerated, and we're seeing, you know, incredible user growth across platforms like Reddit, but also across digital campfire platforms like smaller, more niche. How long is this moment going to last? I mean, obviously no one knows what the future holds, but are we in a moment right now that's really special for creating and building communities, do you think? Or is this sort of like, this is the foreseeable future, get used to it for a while?
Internet communities are always going to be a thing. and it's always going to be, there'll always be new ones, and some will get bigger, some will get smaller. The internet was built, like that was a big reason why the internet was built.
Yeah.
I will say that there's, peaks and valleys in terms of how receptive people are to trying new products and trying new communities in their lives. And what I'll say is the amount of interest right now has never been higher as long as I've been alive. I wasn't around in the early 90s really, but I imagine there was a lot of interest back then. Maybe it's something similar. In 2008 when the App Store came out, maybe it's similar to that. In 2008 when the App Store came out, there was a lot of, you download your App Store, you get your iPhone, you download the App Store, you download apps because you're like, I need to fill it up with apps. I think that's the sort of vibe right now with internet communities and new tools, is that people just want, they want to try new things.
They're hungry. They're really hungry for them.
So, my advice to people is like, now's the time. I know a lot of people have full-time jobs, but you can still invest and create communities, especially if you're passionate about it. It's not going to feel like work. So,
and you're really saying anywhere that there is a passion, there is a business, any channel.
Absolutely.
What I'd love to dig into because there's a lot of confusion about the term community, and I think it's misused a lot of the time. It often functions as a kind of a stand-in for audiences. So can you talk through the difference and maybe define community versus audience and like why it's different?
Totally. The way I see communities versus audience, the example I give is like, I think David Spinks actually from CMX might have written about it or told me about it. Whereas think about Airbnb as a community. So in the beginning, you have the co-founders of Airbnb. So two or three co-founders, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia. That's a community. Like they started the company together. They fundraised together. They went to Y Combinator together. Like that's a real community. Then, around that initial circle, there's another circle, which is the founding team. And those are like the first 10 people there. And that's also a community. And then it was like the first 100 people. But it gets a bit weaker as you go out. And then it's like, the first 1,000 people. And then it's like the alumni of Airbnb. And then it's like the alumni who are LGBT maybe, who worked, in the early days. And you can keep going around and around. And, at the very outside, you just have like, California plus LGBT. And then you go outside and it's like California. And then, so I think an audience is when you get to the, outskirts of a concentric circle. And it's just people who are just a tourist, essentially, around an interest. They might be interested at a time. It might be a piece of content that they see and they're like, okay, this is interesting, but I'm a tourist. I come, I see, I leave. A community is something that's a part of you, your membership to this. It's what defines who you are. If I'm a co-founder of Airbnb, I'm very much like, this is a big part of me. If I'm on the founding team, if I'm employee number 100, if I'm like the first 5 LGBT people in, the first 100 employees, like that's a badge of honor to me, and that's exciting. That's the difference. Now you're right. People do use audience basically as community. So they're talking about like, yeah, let me go create a like community for people who like, live in the United States, and that's it. And it's just like, no, that's like, well, maybe the United States there's a patriotic community, so maybe that's a bad example, but like,
it's too broad.
Too broad.
Yeah.
Too broad.
So can you really convert audiences to communities? Like I see a lot of brands, for example, trying to, now that this is like having a moment, okay, we know we need to find our community, like, but we have an audience. What do? We actually haven't cultivated that within people who, let's say, buy our product or who know about our product. Can you convert them? Is there a way to do
Yeah.
that?
Yes. So you can, but I think oftentimes there's a ceiling in terms of like the amount of people you can convert to a true community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like in the example of like America as a community, like there's probably millions of people who are actually like diehard like Americans and want to be a part of this like virtual community, and maybe you can sell them merch, and maybe you can be, you know, create events and IRL, and that, and you know, I guess that happens. There's millions of those people, and that's like a big community, right? But there's not that many people who are like diehards about like
Toothpaste.
non-toxic candles or
Right,
something like
right,
that.
right.
Like there's definitely going to be a diehard community, but it might not be tens or hundreds of millions.
Mm-hmm.
Your audience might be someone who is a tourist and might buy one, or might even just read one article about it.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I think, you know, one way to convert an audience to a community member is by education.
Through content,
So
like through.
through content, correct.
Okay.
So we once did a study that said that if you come to a website or app, and this was done on a large auto company's website,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And if you like went to, let's say, Toyota's website, and you completed your main desired action on that website, and that main
Mm-hmm.
desired action might be looking at cars or
Mm-hmm.
finding out what the
Mm-hmm.
price is, not necessarily like buying a car. If you completed that task, that primary task, then you are 67% more likely to buy the product or service. So
Hmm.
sounds obvious in hindsight. It's like, hey, let me educate you about cars and maybe you'll be more likely to buy a car.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what you do if you want to close the gap
Right.
between audience and community.
It's so interesting you say that, because I feel like so many of the new communities that are springing up are around education, just education, educating or getting smarter about an idea, a concept, a niche, whatever that may be. If you think about like a master class, for example, and the content tends to be very educational and
That's
very
right.
niche. Yeah. Very, very niche. Well, I'd love to open it up to questions. So anybody who has questions, just use the raise hand feature and I'll unmute you and call on you, or just pop the question in the chat and I will read it off for you. In the meantime, I'll continue to ask questions. This is fascinating. So what are the most, I would say, what are some of the best examples of community first businesses you're seeing out there? Whether it's, you know, products, platforms, apps, not ones you've created necessarily, but
Yeah.
ones that you've seen and like, damn, I wish I had done that.
There's a company called Stadium Live, which I really like. It's
Mm-hmm.
sports, but for Gen Z. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, you download this app, you get this avatar, you can customize your avatar, and then you could be thrown into these like virtual rooms with with the context around like the Toronto Maple Leafs are playing the Montreal Canadiens, and you're
Mm-hmm.
in this like group with all these other avatars, which you can communicate, and you can watch the game, you could like answer quizzes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like this virtual third space that
Mm-hmm.
you know that you can go to, and it's very targeted towards Gen Z. So like what they did really well, I think, is they um they looked at, you know, what do Gen Z sports fans want, what does that community want,
Mm-hmm.
and what are their behaviors, you know, versus like
Trying to
you know,
smush
boomers.
it on them. Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
and who's speaking to them. So did that one come from Reddit? Because Jason asked, what are the best unbundlings of Reddit that you've seen? And I think there was a community on Reddit that was like Gen Z sports fans, right? Or am I misremembering?
Probably. I'm not sure if it came direct from Reddit. I will say that um, one app that came to me today, actually, that I got a text about a new test flight, is this app called Tendies,
Tendies, how do you spell
and
it?
I'll put in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Tendies.
Okay.
the URL.
You can get an AF.AF now.
So you should like look at the copy of this website. Like open it up on your computer.
Okay. Should I share screen?
Share screen.
Okay,
Because I think
cool.
it's a great example of so this is unbundling the subreddit called Wall Street Bets.
Okay. Chat with degenerates in the same positions as you. Right. It immediately, you know exactly who this is for. And what it's about. This is for people who are like obsessed with all things Wall Street, but also it's a certain like personality.
Yes. And I don't even know what tendies means. So I Googled it.
Uh-huh.
And
what
came up?
Uh-huh.
Of course, Wall Street Bets came up.
Right.
So if you go, I just put in the chat, if you guys could see it, if you click that link, it says help anew about what are tendies. Husband and I are arguing. I think it means chicken tenders. It's a hedging strategy used to mitigate the risk of a livestock not becoming tender. So mostly for livestock futures.
Interesting. So this really was a direct outgrowth of Reddit.
This is a direct outgrowth of Reddit.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's probably a zillion more examples like that.
There's a zillion more examples.
Jessica has a question, so I'm going to ask her to come on into the chat. Hey, Jessica.
Fun. This has been great. I've got pages of notes.
Same.
Greg, how do you think about specificity of an interest as it would relate to sort of like the eagerness or like the sort of enthusiasm of that community?
Could you just like elaborate more on that?
Yeah, like is like, do you try to hone in on a community that's more specific rather than more broad? Like, for example, the person I'm married to is really into cycling, and he spends a lot of time on Reddit looking at like stuff about cycling. And do you tend to like focus in on really specific avenues of an interest, or the more broad the better?
I like actually focusing on like specific that could expand. So like, for example, tendies looks like it's focused on like a unique type of day trader who understands like what a tendy is, which is like probably like a very, very small percentage of like active traders in the US or in the world. But like the question is like, if it can work for, you know, the 100,000 people or the 50,000 or 150,000 people that this particular community, could it expand to all day traders? Then could it expand to all active traders? Then could it expand like to all of finance? Then could it expand to personal finance besides investing? So I think like one important exercise to do if you're creating a community is to just map how you would connect the dots, basically, if everything like were to work well. So I tend to focus on communities that I could connect the dots, because I find it just the same amount of work to create a small startup than it is to create a big startup for whatever reason. So I might as well focus on something that I could connect the dots to, and I'm not like, there's not a ceiling.
You're not wedded to this tiny group of people that you're creating all this and putting out all this energy for.
Yeah, and it sounds
Correct.
like specificity leads to generality. There's sort of like a breadcrumb trail that you can see there.
Right. And I mean, the great example of that is Discord, Discord, $4+ billion company, just recently went from, well, it started off in like League of Legends, adding Counter-Strike Go, adding Dota, adding, basically all esports, then went beyond esports to like more casual gaming. Now just added like, if you have a book club, they want you to use it. Another good example is Twitch. Twitch has added music as a category. It's a big part of their strategy. They started off at esports, then just like general live streaming, now music. So like, where are they going to go next? And it's interesting because as those companies get the cycle of unbundling just happens again. Like the unbundler becomes, or the person that the person that's bundling becomes unbundled, I guess, or unbundler becomes bundling, or so that's
Cool.
the way to think about it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. We have a question from Ryan. How do you think about habit formation? So people are used to going to Facebook and Reddit. What can drive someone to a more narrowly focused site? I think this is such a great question. And it's like, I constantly think about it because I think of digital campfires as sort of this cross-section of great product and a community. And if you don't nail both, then you're kind of out of luck. So how do you think about this? I'd love you to talk about that.
Well, yeah, one of the things that that I like to think about when I'm creating a product or community is, what are the things how do I align my product roadmap that it's basically the anti-product roadmap of that particular company? So what are
the
things
anti-product roadmap? Interesting. Say more.
So like, what are things that Facebook could never do? For example, what are things that Reddit could never do? And in the sense that if they did this, if they added this feature, it would make no sense to them, or it would completely ruin their product experience. There's one product that they Checkout is working on right now. I can't talk too much about it, but it's kind of like building like the anti-Spotify. And if you basically take a list of like what they're working on, Spotify, and you can just anti it, you can come up with some quite interesting things. So
that's a cool exercise. It's almost like a thought experiment to do that on pick your top 3 favorite platforms, and then go through the exercise of doing that anti list. It's really, really interesting. There was a second part to Jason's question, actually, that I'd love you to dig in on. What do you think will be the next subreddit to be unbundled? And maybe it's just, you may be working on like 5 products in this area, but maybe there's certain areas or certain actual subreddits.
Yeah, I mean, we have a list of probably 150 subreddits that are primed for being unbundled. I don't have that list in front of me, but there's a lot of opportunity. Like even if you just throw up, like I can just put it up right now. Like even if you throw up redditlist.com, like if you look at the growth in the last 24 hours and some of these communities, like Minecraft championship, like, okay, maybe there's something that you can create around Minecraft that like is tournament based, or fantasy Minecraft, or something there. I like, there's a lot of opportunity in games, I would say, video games and communities around video games, just because there's always new video games, so there's always new communities that could be created around it. Unemployment is one of the most popular growth subreddits. So people are unemployed. What can we build for that community or those groups of people?
So you can also break it down into categories. Like, what are the actual, maybe it's what trends do you start to see again and again? Okay, gaming comes up again and again, or cooking comes up again and again. You don't necessarily have to know from one glance at this trending chart, right? You'll start to see things emerge. I just want to be mindful of time. It is just a minute after the hour. So I am going to wrap things up unless anyone else has questions. This has been like fantastically informative. I am just going to ask you one last question about kind of putting a value on community for businesses who maybe don't get it. We had spoken a little bit about this, and I'm really curious to know, for those of us in this space, it really makes a lot of sense to invest in this, and a community first strategy is obviously a driver of a business. But when you're, let's say, inside a company trying to make a case for, look, we need to invest in this, we need to actually put more resources towards this. Oftentimes the question is, well, how does it pay off? And is there a way, like an actual way you can value what you're doing in terms of like dollar amounts or like EBITDA? Like how do you think about that? Is that even something you even think about?
Well, something I think about, I think the first thing I'll say is that I think we're going to look back in 10 years and be like, wow, the companies that are here today, that we like, the most popular companies, that, like the up and comers that are now the incumbents, are the companies that built the greatest communities.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
the companies that aren't going to stay around are going to be these, like, you know, these sort of like tourist based companies that, like, I just buy this product because it's just there on the shelf, and but I have no connection to this product, or I have no connection to it. So if you're trying to, you know, build word of mouth of your at your company, and you're trying to retain your customers,
Mm-hmm.
the best way to do it is through community. So what's that worth? I mean,
Right. Like
a lot. I mean, a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think the people on here get it, and I think it's quickly going to make sense to those who don't. And I'm excited to be part of sort of this first or early wave, and this, talking to somebody who's been working on this for years. So Greg, thank you so much. This was so informative. I feel like there were so many little knowledge bombs you dropped, and I can't wait to go back through the tape and just extract them all. So I will be sharing a greatest hits takeaway of this episode. And anyone who signed up for the email list, you'll get that. Thank you so much to everybody who joined. I'm so happy to have all of you and for your great questions. Thank you. And thank you
Greg, so
again.
much for having me, and thanks
so
everyone for listening and the questions. That was really fun.
So awesome. All right. Good luck, Greg. Good luck up in Montreal.
Bye, guys.
All right. Take care. Bye.